All right, political analyst Martin Himel joins me now live from Israel. Good evening, Martin. Thanks for your time. Firstly, I want to ask you, what do you make of what Zelensky had to say just before?
I think that Zelensky made a very effective speech that reached the hearts of the American politicians, the American congressmen and women that were present. I think he doesn't realistically expect a no-fly zone over his country because it's been made very clear that the United States won't enter direct combat with the Russians. But I think the chances of him getting more advanced surface-to-air missiles that would strike Russian bombers that are devastating his cities, or to get more planes, more MiGs, is becoming more of a realistic option. The United States has to do something more than sanctions at this stage. It just seems so obvious. Yeah. It won't put real troops, but more missiles and more planes are a possibility.
And, you know, Putin also speaking a little earlier today, saying that he has no intention of invading Ukraine, and also comparing Russophobia to anti-Semitism. And what do you make of that?
Well, he certainly has affinity for Jews. The Holocaust, Nazis, anti-Semitism, that's for sure. But I think he's trying to create himself into a victim here. He's trying to change the narrative of Russia, the occupier, the invader, the brutal force, a quasi-Nazi force, if you may, and changing it to Russia the victim, Russia being oppressed by world hatred of Slavs, of Russians. It's another attempt to just change the narrative of what's very obviously not happening on the ground.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we've already seen a number of failed talks, Martin. It seems as though Russia doesn't want anything to do with diplomacy. Is there anything, in your opinion, that can change that whatsoever?
Well, I think Vladimir Putin is not convinced yet that he cannot win the war. I think he still believes that by laying siege, starving, bombing, and maintaining that pressure, he will subjugate a lot of Ukraine. That's what I think. He still believes that. But every day that goes by and he doesn't do it is another day it's going to be harder to do that, because the Ukrainians are going to get more advanced anti-aircraft weaponry, more advanced missiles, and it'll be harder for him to do that. And they'll be more effective in striking the hidden artillery positions of the Russians. So he's not there yet, but once he gets to that point, there's a lot of face-saving gestures that could come out, including Ukraine declaring its neutrality and not joining NATO.
And, you know, you were speaking before about the US, Zelensky really trying to appeal there to them. You know, it's really so far been very cautious of getting too involved militarily. But, you know, can we expect this to change as this situation deteriorates?
I don't think the United States at this stage is going to ever engage with the Russians on a direct war in Ukraine. If it spills over, it's another story. But I think they're going to do an awful lot more to prevent Zelensky from completely collapsing. I think that if they get him enough missiles, enough planes, enough anti-tank and artillery positioned missiles, that Zelensky can hold on for a while, for a long time. And a stalemate is a win for the West. It's not necessarily a win for the Ukrainians, but it's a win for the West. And as long as they feel they can do that, they're not going to go employ a no-fly zone and shoot at Russians.
Yeah, and what can we expect, Martin, from this emergency meeting of NATO, given the alliance has now said it doesn't want Ukraine to be a part of it?
Well, I think that's the political fig that they're willing to offer, the olive branch they're willing to offer to Russia if he will take a face-saving gesture. But at the same time, I think they're going to declare much more support militarily, economically for Ukraine to continue its war and reaffirm harder sanctions. Maybe they'll offer that olive branch of neutrality for Ukraine concerning NATO. There's no point in offering it until Putin's ready to accept it, but we'll wait and see next week.
And that's what the Kremlin is saying, Martin, you know, that a neutral Ukraine is a possible compromise. What would this actually look like?
That all depends on where what Mr. Putin feels his chances of winning. What the Ukrainians would like is that the Ukrainian army will be stronger, but not allied with NATO, that Ukraine will have an independent, neutral policy when it comes to Western Europe and Russia. And that's about it. But I think the Russians think is Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine disarms. Ukraine has a demilitarized state, no real military to speak of, just a police force, which could always be could be invaded at the whim of the Russians. I don't think the Ukrainians will accept that, but that's what the Russians, I think, would want more than anything else. And if they could change the government, they would do that too.
You know, so many calls, Martin, you just mentioned it before, for this no-fly zone over Ukraine. You know, what is the likelihood, if this continues, more people are dying, you know, of that being implemented?
Very low chance. Look, we saw it in Syria. People were dying left, right, and center, and the United States did not get involved in a direct war with Russia. True, this is Europe. It's a different situation. I just think that at this stage, the Americans do really believe that if they keep arming the Ukrainians, they will avert a Ukrainian surrender. And as long as they believe that, and as long as Ukraine's willing to fight that fight, then they're not going to go towards the no-fly zone. If Kiev is about to fall and Zelensky is about to, be deposed, that will push the whole issue to the forefront. Another thing that could push the issue to the forefront is if Putin feels he's in a big corner, if Putin feels he's about to lose control of Russia, the oligarchs go against him, the politicians go against him, then it should be in his interest to say, well, I'm about to go to tactical nuclear weapons and solve this once and for all. That would put a direct collision course between the U.S. and Russia, and the fly zone would be a very minor part of it then, be a much bigger issue.